When greening has been detected in an area, a step that's very vital to the management of this disease is to remove infected trees. And there are several elements to that, but most importantly is to define and remove those trees as soon as possible. Our recommendations include treating those trees with an insecticide in advance to prevent the movement of psyllids that might be on those trees and further spreading the disease. So tree removal is a very important element of greening management. And psyllids, as the major vector for this disease, require steps to develop lower populations than we see naturally in the field. The use of insecticides, the use of biological control, and many other tactics combine to develop a management system to keep those populations as low as possible. We use systemic insecticides matched with foliar applications of pesticide, and in concert they develop population suppression that helps us get through the season and keep those levels low. Young trees are particularly vulnerable because they flush multiple times. They're often not synchronous with the other plantings around, and so you see more attractiveness to the psyllids which feed on that new flush. So they're more vulnerable to infection by the psyllids, and therefore an important target for pesticide applications. We have the opportunity to use both soil drenches and foliar applications in concert, and multiple applications through the season timed with the development of flush and the seasonal phenology of the populations gives us the best opportunity to keep those populations low. In mature trees it's more difficult. The trees are larger, more canopy volume, and there are some restrictions on the pesticides that are available, so we have to develop a separate type of program for mature tree psyllid management, and that requires scouting and development of tactics that rely on a different subset of the tools that are available. But foliar applications and some systemic materials also can be used for suppression of psyllids on mature trees. A difficulty in the use of foliar pesticides comes at the bloom time when there's flowers on the trees and bees are coming in to pollinate. And so we have a particular challenge during that time to try to avoid the use of foliar sprays so that they don't interfere with the bees. And there are opportunities to deal with that. Certain seasons when there's unusual flush patterns or protracted blooms cause a little bit more problem. But in general, we try to recommend avoiding the bloom time with foliar pesticide applications. And in a similar vein, managing the flush patterns of citrus is very important in psyllid and disease management, because as new flushes come on, that's the time when the psyllids are attracted and the most active time for disease spread. So through fertilization, irrigation management, and other practices such as hedging and topping, we've got to integrate these so that they don't further exacerbate the problem of psyllid and greening transmission. So managing the production system in addition to the pest management issues is really a part of the total picture. So in summing up greening, we have a vector, we have an insect that moves the disease, we have the disease itself, the Wong Bing bacteria, and then we have the vulnerable citrus plant. And to be successful in managing these diseases, we've got to take into consideration practices which bring all three of those elements together and give an integrated control strategy that keeps the spread of greening to the absolute minimum.
Okay, we're here now. I'm joining Dr. Susan Halbert. We're going to learn some tips about how to survey for greening in citrus. But before we do that, one more reminder about sanitation. Although it's not required in the CHRP program, it's a good idea to sanitize between blocks within an operation. So before we enter, we're going to sanitize our hands and feet, and then go take a look at some trees that are showing symptoms of various stages of greening disease. So we're looking at a sweet orange tree with it looks like some interveinal yellowing.
Got a lot of nutrition problems on these trees, and some of it's due to greening and some of it isn't. We also have a lot of leaf deformation. A lot of it's due to leaf miner.
Yeah, the leaf miner is attacking much of the new flush on here, and I think we're about to see the second flush of the season on these trees.
We've just had several inches of rain here. These trees also have a lot of psyllid damage. And
how do you recognize psyllid damage?
See the notching in the leaf?
Yes.
They're notched, as opposed to the leaf miner where you actually see the mine, but you see that it's curled.
Leaf miners like to attack that new flush. So do the psyllids, I think.
So do the psyllids.
Yeah.
But the damage is slightly different. This kind of notching is due to the psyllids, whereas this kind of a curl with the mine on the underside is due to the leaf miner.
This is about a 3 to 5 year old tree, perhaps. And this is a time of year, say in early June, where we're just now getting back into some good symptom expression. Is that right?
The symptoms are pretty tough to find this time of year. Either you just see nutrition symptoms, or the mottle is very, very subtle at this time of year. It's best to survey for the blotchy mottle in the fall. And as you know, the lab is much more likely to run your sample quickly if you find typical blotchy mottle symptoms.
As you look at this tree, what criteria would you use to tell nutritional deficiency from perhaps a good greening symptom?
Most of what I see here is nutritional deficiency. So this would be one that if you suspected greening, you'd probably want to sample. You would
what do you think about
that
that one? Yeah.
You would notice this bright colored yellow veins and so on. But it's not the typical blotchy mottle. And if you look into the tree where you're usually going to see more typical symptoms, you don't see anything. So this would definitely be one that you'd want to take a sample of rather than assuming that it was infected.
That probably rank as maybe a low to a medium suspect in the clinic.
And another thing is that here you can see a wound on the stem, and that will often cause symptoms that look like
yellow
this.
vein syndrome, yes, from a nutritional upset.
And so that wound on the stem might be the cause of this. One thing to point out here is that there is Ola V. nigrum, which is one of the native predators of the Asian citrus psyllid, which is the vector, of course. And you can recognize it because it's black with 2 red spots, and it has white on the pronotum. And that's a native species that actually was kind of a rare beetle before it showed up, before the Asian citrus psyllid showed up, and then it increased.
So now we're seeing more of those.
We're seeing a lot of
That's
those
a good
now.
thing.
That's a good thing.
Well, how about these trees over here now?
So we're walking along surveying the grove, and it's best to have 2 people per row, one looking on one side and one on the other side. This is a really ideal day to look because it's not bright sunshine. It's hard to see greening backlit. Now we look at this tree and we see that part of it is yellow. That's the yellow dragon. And so we look in here and we want to figure out why is it yellow. And often you need to look in the middle of the tree. The symptoms aren't all that good this time of year, but you know, we can see that that fruit is a bit lopsided. And we look for blotchy mottle.
And when a surveyor finds a tree that is suspect, I suppose their company manager would have some recommendation on flagging that tree or putting a tree count down and recording it in a notebook so they can come out and take a look at that. It's important to stress that anybody who has access to the grove, comes in and out, should be cognizant of the symptoms of greening, of any serious citrus disease. Okay, we've left a series of trees that have a fairly normal green canopy with some micronutrient deficiencies. Now we've come across 2 trees in a row that have a lot of yellow shoots in them. And it looks as though something more than just a nutritional deficiency is going on here.
Okay, here we see a lopsided fruit and typical blotchy mottle. It shows through on the back. And here we see in this flush, we see the psyllid damage. That is characteristic psyllid notching. This, on the other hand, is a leaf miner. So you can see the difference between the psyllid notching on this leaf and the leaf miner on this leaf. These leaves here are chlorotic, but we wouldn't necessarily say that these are greening symptoms, but we do see the damage from the vector on the flush. and we see the greening symptoms in the back.
And this next tree as well, both of these should be sampled or marked on your survey clipboard. Quite a bit of model here.
Another clue with this one, and this time of year you're looking for as many clues as you can find. The drop fruit on the ground might indicate that there's a problem. And also there's some blotchy mottled fruit right there.
Here's one of your parasites here. You may want to get a shot of in just a moment. He's up pretty high here. We've got a new flush here, lots of psyllids on this tree. This is a bad actor. This is one that ought to be removed very promptly because it's showing clear symptoms of greening. It's got the vector on it. The vectors are going to be leaving with the pathogen and infecting new trees very soon if they haven't already.
We have psyllids on the new growth.
A lot of upright growth. That may be due to the micronutrient deficiency or the variety, but the overall yellowing pattern here and the blotchy mottle in the interior leaves is a strong indication that we've got greening.
The Asian citrus psyllid, of course, is the vector of the pathogens that cause citrus greening disease. We think that the most efficient transmission occurs when the nymphs pick up the pathogen, and then when they become adults, they transmit it very well. Perhaps less efficiently, the adults can pick up the pathogen and then transmit it to other plants. Asian citrus psyllids are tiny insects. They sit at a 45-degree angle either on the leaves or on the stems. They jump readily. The adults jump readily if you bother them. And you can find them also on the newest flush that's coming out about maybe 1 millimeter or 2 long. They'll be actively laying eggs on that flush. The nymphs look more like scale insects, except they have wing pads and obvious eyes. And they also will move when you irritate them, whereas scale insects will stay put.
Now we've come across the yellow tree in a series of otherwise fairly normal looking green trees. This could be an indication of greening. On the other hand, you probably ought to check to see if there's any evidence of foot rot at the base of the tree. That would be indicated by some seepage or necrotic tissues of the trunk right near the foot of the tree. That could cause an overall yellowing syndrome as well.
Okay, we found this tree that's got pretty good symptoms. Let's take a sample here. And what we want to get the best symptoms that we can find for the lab to run. And so here we have some leaves that have vein corking, and it usually starts on the lateral veins, and it's sometimes on the mid vein, and it's not usually on the back. And here we can see the blotchy mottle caused by greening, the characteristic symptom coming through the leaf on the back. And on the front, you have vein corking. If you have that, that leaf is almost always going to be positive in the lab. So that would be a really good sample to take if you find a leaf like that. So here's our sample. And Tim's filling out the slip. The protocol is to put the sample into a plastic bag. And then we put it into another plastic bag. And there's another plastic bag for the slip so that it doesn't get soggy.
Now I need to record a GPS reading for this site. How do we do that?
We have a GPS meter. And we take the GPS reading in decimal degrees rather than minutes and seconds. And it's doing really well now. It's down to 8.3 feet accuracy. So we want to fold the slip so we can see it through the bag.
Out.
That's so if there's any condensation or anything like that, it won't get soggy. Can you hold this for a second, please? Now, do we need to decontaminate this bag too?
Yes, we should. Just for canker purposes. We're not at risk of transmitting greening by this process, but if canker was here and we were not aware of it, we could certainly transmit that disease. And we try to decontaminate everything that we've used here and has come in contact with citrus in particular.
And where we want to store this sample is in a cooler, because if we let it sit on the dashboard of the car, even if it's infected and there's a lot of greening bacteria in it, it'll be toast by the time it gets back to the laboratory if it's been sitting on the dashboard all day. And when we ship this sample, we want to ship it by some kind of overnight post and not on the weekend, because if it sits in the FedEx truck over the weekend, it's not any better than having it sit in the post office for 2 or 3 days. I'm Susan Halbert. We've been out doing a greening survey on foot, and now I'd like to introduce Matt Brody, who's our area supervisor for Southwest Florida, and he's going to talk about how to do the windshield survey, which is another important tool. He's particularly good at it.
Thank you, Susan. One thing we're going to talk about is windshield survey. And windshield survey does not replace the need for a tree-by-tree survey by foot 4 times a year. But it is a tool that can be used or utilized by the growers since they're in the groves day in, day out. One of the things that we'll be concentrating on are the perimeters and also the wild areas. So Susan, let's go ahead and get started. One of the things that we look for while doing a windshield survey are yellow dragons, which have been discussed earlier in this video, dieback in the tops, maybe nutrient deficiencies, and also symptoms that might resemble road blight or phytophthora. With windshield survey, there might be a lot of false positives or false, or negative results, but maybe 8 out of 10 may not turn out to be greening, but those 2 that you do find, remember that early detection is certainly the key, a key role in this game.
This sweet orange tree captures most of the symptoms that we could see in a June survey. We've got some dieback in the top of the tree that should be an immediate signal to stop and take a closer look. We've got some off-season shock bloom in the tree, which is another indicator of possible greening. As we look closer into the canopy, particularly in the interior, we begin to see the mottled leaves that are characteristic of the greening disease. Those symptoms will be more plentiful as the season wears on. But at this point, we have to look very carefully for that confirming blotchy mottle syndrome on the interior leaves. I expect by October, November, we will see that through much of the canopy on a tree like this.
There's a few on the edge, too. There's that good one.
Yeah, that's clear in the very center of the tree. We've got a very telling branch on one of the shoots. We're going to pull that one out and take a closer look at it.
It's common sometimes to have the greening show up on the water sprouts.
That's a characteristic symptom right there on that leaf with a mottle that is irrespective of the veins.
More than 2 colors, and it shows through very well on the back. And the fruit's a bit lopsided.
So this is a good view of a tree that would capture most of the symptoms that you would expect to see from a greening infected sweet orange.
Paul, how about tell me a little bit about the history of greening? You know, when it was found, and what was your first response during the first year?
Oh man, in our grove, I guess you showed up in January of '06 and asked to do a perimeter survey of some blocks. Mm-hmm. We first found it in that Rio Red block in the back of the property. I think we found 4 trees.
I believe it,
that were suspect, and 2 ended up being positive. We eliminated those trees, of course. We've always followed that protocol from the beginning. I think we surveyed again about 3 months ago, a complete survey of the block, and found 0 trees with that were positive, and only took samples from 2. So that's a positive sign. And then we found the intrusion in the block over by the woods that has been our biggest intrusion, and that we've managed most diligently. That I think he ended up to about 172 trees total that we pulled, but still it was less than 2% of the total tree count of that particular block.
Paul, do you have any advice that you would give to your fellow growers on how to manage HLB?
Yeah. Some of the best advice I ever got was the best fertilizer for a grove is footprints in the field, and that really applies in this case. When you head out to go to work that day, don't be thinking as much of where you're going to eat lunch as where you're going to go to inspect your groves for greening. And a very proactive approach is necessary if you want to have some longevity, you know,
right.
In this business at this time. I think
that's a great plan.
My name is Michael Rogers. I'm an entomologist at the University of Florida IFAS Citrus Research and Education Center in Lake Alfred. Today I'll be talking about management of the Asian citrus psyllid and citrus leaf miner. There are 2 sections under the CHRP business plan, one which deals with citrus screening management, and the second part which addresses management of citrus canker. As part of the citrus screening management section, it states that psyllids will be managed with recommended insecticide applications as needed. Under the canker management section of this plan, it states to treat to the extent possible with insecticide treatments to control pests such as leaf miner when feasible. So today I'll be talking about management of these 2 pests and how you can design your individual CHRP business plan for managing these 2 different pests. First, I'll talk about citrus leaf miner management and the relationship between leaf miner and canker. The citrus leaf miner does not spread canker per se, but does predispose leaves to infection due to the damage caused by leaf miner to the leaf surface. These leaf miner mines serve as a site for the buildup of canker inoculum, resulting in spread of bacteria to healthy trees. So this is the basis for the need to control citrus leaf miner in areas where canker is established or present. Leaf miner damage becomes evident in late April to early May and continues throughout the summer months. Growth of young trees can be severely delayed due to the damage caused by leaf miner on these young leaves produced by the trees. Probably the best method for controlling leaf miner damage on young trees is through the use of soil-applied imidacloprid. So as you're writing your business plan for addressing leaf miner, one of the things that you might include in your business plan is the use of soil-applied imidacloprid applications for not only managing citrus leaf miner, but also citrus psyllid, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. In addition to these soil imidacloprid drenches for leaf miner control, additional foliar sprays can be applied as needed throughout the season to manage leaf miner on these young trees. Now, in terms of managing leaf miner on mature trees, sporadic flush that's present throughout the summer rainy season makes controlling leaf miner damage much more difficult on these large trees. On mature trees, managing leaf miner is probably only feasible in situations where canker infection is high in blocks of processed fruit or in blocks of fresh fruit where presence of canker cannot be tolerated if the fruit is to be exported. Currently, to date, there are no damage thresholds that have been established for leaf miner in terms of how that relates to canker infection. So growers at this point have to use their best judgment as to when leaf miner control is warranted for their situation. Now, one possible approach for developing a business plan to address leaf miner on mature trees would be the idea of multi-targeting, which we've talked about in the past at meetings presented throughout the state. And the idea of multi-targeting is if you're already going to be in the grove putting out a pesticide application for one pest, say for example rust mites or Diprepes root weevil, choose a product that will control those pests but also provide some benefit in terms of controlling leaf miner. This will reduce the need for you to go through and make an additional application, spend more money just for leaf miner control. So it's much more justifiable that way. So one example might be products such as abamectin or diflubenzuron, that would be agromec or micromite. Both of those products provide very good control of rust mites. And so if you're in your summer oil spray, if you're going to be controlling rust mites with a miticide, choosing one of those two products would also provide you some benefit in terms of controlling leaf miner populations at the same time. Also, something else you might write into your business plan would be that when you're going through the grove to add oil, petroleum oil, to your spray tank. Oil sprays typically provide about at least 2 weeks of leaf miner control on new flush when treated with the oil. It tends to repel leaf miner. So that might be another option to write into your business plan for leaf miner management. Now I want to spend the rest of the time talking about probably a more important problem, at least more recently, and that is management of Asian citrus-psyllid, which is the insect responsible for the spread of citrus greening disease, or the citrus greening pathogen. And what I want to talk about are the keys to successful management of the Asian citrus-psyllid. And the first one of these important things to consider is that it is important to control psyllids early in the year. We've conducted multiple trials throughout 2006, 2007 that have demonstrated that if you get out prior to the first flush in a grove and use a product to control the adult psyllids, this will result in lower psyllid populations throughout the spring flushing period. Such dormant applications really need to be the starting point for season-long psyllid management programs. Getting out early and controlling the psyllids is also important because we need to avoid spraying for psyllids during the bloom period, or the times when citrus trees are in bloom. And this is due to issues with pollinators, especially honeybees. Most of the products that are very effective for controlling psyllids are very toxic to honeybees and other pollinators. And so thus, they cannot be applied when citrus is in bloom. So getting out and controlling psyllids early in the year will help to prevent the need to spray for psyllids during this bloom period. Now here you can see an example of a program we did during 2007 looking at early season psyllid control. And here what we did, we had a grove that the entire grove was sprayed with danitol, the pyrethroid, in late December or early January. And then part of these blocks, we came back January 15th and also included a Timic application. So what you see here is that the orange line shows the psyllid population increasing. It's starting to increase here in February. And this is about 6-7 weeks after the danitol application was made. However, when you include the Timic application with the danitol, that extends our period of control out to about the early to mid-April, which is towards the end of the bloom period. So what this shows here is a program, writing a program up where, say, for example, Timic versus plus a danitol application may be a good starting point for your program to take you through that bloom period without the need to make any more additional pesticide applications. It's also important when you're planning ahead to optimize your trips through the grove. Whenever you're making a spray for other purposes, such as during the summer oil sprays for a greasy spot, if you can add in an insecticide for psyllid control, this will reduce the need for additional trips throughout the grove, specifically for psyllid control. And as always, you need to check the compatibility of whatever you're putting out as far as your spray tank mixes, the compatibility of those products prior to application. It's also very important to understand how these products work and what you can expect from these products in terms of psyllid control. In particular, knowing the effectiveness of different products when applied to trees, say when new flush is present, versus times when new flush is absent or flush is more sporadic in nature. And really what we're looking at here are whether these products will control psyllid adults and nymphs, or if you're only getting control of psyllid nymphs. That's something that you need to take into consideration when choosing your products. And so specifically, if we're talking about products that control psyllid adults and nymphs, most of the products that we currently use that do provide control of adult psyllids will also control nymphs. These products are typically broad-spectrum products, include things such as organophosphates, carbamates, pyrethroids, and some of the neonicotinoid insecticides. These products provide extended residual control of adult psyllids in the tree canopy through the residues that remain on the mature foliage, and this will last for a week to several weeks depending on the product. And because these products remain in the tree canopy and are continually killing adult psyllids that are either present or immigrating into a grove, this reduces the chance of any new flush being produced after the application is made from being infested with psyllids, or egg laying from these adults that are present. The one drawback to these broad spectrum products, however, is the fact that they are broad spectrum, so they will control or have effects on a number of insects, so including beneficials that keep things such as scale insects in check. So it's important to at least recognize the fact that there are drawbacks to using these products, and that these may create other pest problems in addition that you'll need to monitor for. Now, if you compare the products that provide control of adults and nymphs to products that provide only control of psyllid nymphs, these products that only control nymphs will leave surviving adult psyllids, which can then lay eggs on new flush produced that was not protected by that initial spray. So, for example, if you spray a product that controls only psyllid nymphs, you will control all the nymphs present on the flush at that time, but say a week later, if new flush is being produced, that flush is not protected, there are still psyllids back in the canopy of those trees that will come in and reinfest that flush, and so you have psyllid populations continuing to build up. For this reason, we recommend that these products should not be the primary tool used for psyllid management. They are useful, and probably a more appropriate use of these products would be as part of a multi-targeting spray, similar to what I talked about earlier for citrus leaf miner. The idea being, I'll use the rust mite example again, if you need to control rust mites during your summer wool spray, choosing a product that will also control psyllids will provide you some additional benefit. So really these products that control psyllid nymphs should be used in addition to the primary psyllid sprays that you're using in a grove for controlling both adults and nymphal psyllids. Here are some examples of products that affect both psyllid adults and nymphs, as well as products that only affect or control psyllid nymphs. In terms of psyllid adult and nymph control, these products include fenpropyrethrin or danitol, imidacloprid, which includes Admire, Pravado, and some of the various generic products now available, chlorpyrifos or Lorsban, aldicarb, Timic, dimethoate, and carbaryl or 7. Again, these are all fairly broad spectrum products. Products that control only psyllid nymphs, here's some examples that include things such as diflubenzuron or micromite, abamectin or Agramec, and also petroleum oil will provide some control of psyllid nymphs. And again, these later products that provide control of psyllid nymphs are probably best used as additional sprays for multi-targeting of psyllids. I think the best advice that can be given at this point in time is that regardless of where your grove is located in the state, you need to be operating as if greening is already present. Surveys throughout the state, both residential situations as well as commercial groves, greening is being found continually in new places throughout the state, so it's safe to say that greening is fairly widespread throughout the state of Florida. Because when an infected psyllid starts to feed on a tree, it can take several months to a year or more before the symptoms are actually present and able to be detected on the tree. So for that reason, we need to be acting as if now we do have greening in our groves, and it's just a matter of time before we find the disease present in a grove. In that regard, here at the Citrus Research and Education Center, we've already implemented our own greening management program prior to finding any greening here. And our program includes scouting for greening infected trees 4 times a year. To do this, we've specifically hired scouts for this task. These scouts will also be doing other tasks which include scouting for citrus canker and other pest problems, but their main job is at least 4 times a year to do surveys specifically for greening infected trees. And they'll also be monitoring things such as psyllid populations, give us an update on how our products are doing and if we need additional sprays. So scouting is very important. We will be removing any greening infected trees immediately after they're found. These trees will be cut out, and then the stumps of the trees will be treated with products to kill the root system and prevent any root sprouts. We've also started our pretty aggressive chemical control program for the Asian citrus psyllid. Our program consists at this point of 5 sprays per year on mature trees for psyllid control. And in parts of our groves where permitted, we'll also be using Timic in early January. And in addition, where we have resets and blocks of young trees, those trees will be treated with soil applied imidacloprid a couple of times a year. Here is the breakdown of the psyllid management, the spray program that we've designed for the Citrus Research Education Center groves. This is just an example for you to get a feel for what we are doing here. There's probably not one program is going to fit everybody's situation, but this could be a starting point for you to start developing programs for your own groves if you've not done so. In January, we'll be applying Timic at a rate of 33 pounds per acre. In February, early February, Danitol application. And what the goal is, as I showed earlier in some of the slide, with the Timic Danitol combination, we're hoping that will take us through the March, early April bloom period when we cannot spray for psyllids. And then post-bloom towards the end of April, we'll be using a carbaryl application. We've recently done some work showing that carbaryl appears to be an effective product for psyllid control. We'll continue to evaluate that through part of our management program here. Again, applying this carbaryl 4-pound material at a rate of 2 quarts per acre. Then in late May to early June, the time when we would normally be doing our first summer oil spray, we'll be adding to that oil spray a foliar application of imidacloprid, and at a rate of 16 ounces per acre. Late July, early August, during what time would normally be our second oil spray period, we'll be adding Lorsban to that oil spray for psyllid control. And hopefully by the time we reach September, psyllid populations, our scouts will tell us that psyllids are not that high or can't be found in the grove. We can hopefully get through the September period without the need to make additional sprays for psyllid control. Then mid to late October, we'll have had a little bit of flush in the September-October period more than likely. We'll come in with a carbaryl again to try to clean up the psyllid population, and so we can go into the November, December winter months, hopefully psyllid free. So that is just the outline of the program that we've implemented here at the CREC right now to manage the Asian citrus psyllid. We continue to do research here both at IFAS and USDA on citrus greening. Information continues to be developed, and a lot of the information we have is being put onto our websites. You can find some updated recommendations on the Florida Citrus Pest Management Guide, which is available online, and also through the Citrus Research and Education Center's Citrus Greening Canker Extension website, which you can find at the Citrus Research Education Center homepage. Also, any questions you may have our Citrus Multi-County Extension agents are always happy to help address any questions or issues that come up. And here are listed all the Citrus County agents with their respective counties who can be called upon for any questions that you may have.